Perfection in the kitchen comes at a price. But what if that price is your very soul? When chef Marcus Reynolds uncovers an ancient, cursed cookbook, his culinary dreams turn into a nightmare. Watch as his obsession leads him down a dark and twisted path where every dish is a masterpiece and a horror. Chef Marcus Reynolds was at the pinnacle of his career. His restaurant, La Belle Cuisine, was a revered establishment in the culinary world, attracting patrons from all corners of the globe. But despite his success, Marcus was constantly on the lookout for new ideas, new ways to elevate his dishes to perfection. His passion for cooking bordered on obsession, and it was this obsession that led him to the fateful discovery. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the staff had gone home, Marcus decided to do some renovations in the kitchen. He had always found the far wall of the kitchen oddly thick and out of place, as if it were concealing something. Armed with a hammer and chisel, he began to chip away at the plaster. Hours passed, and just as Marcus was about to give up, his hammer struck something hollow. His heart raced as he chipped away faster, revealing a small, hidden compartment in the wall. Inside was an old, dusty book, its cover made of cracked leather with strange symbols etched into it. There was no title, just an overwhelming sense of age and secrecy. Intrigued, Marcus wiped the dust from the cover and carefully opened the book. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with handwritten recipes in a language he couldn't quite place. The handwriting was elegant yet eerie, as if the ink itself was filled with malice. The recipes were detailed and complex, promising flavors and combinations that Marcus had never encountered before. At the bottom of each page was a strange signature, Lucia Montclair. The name sent a shiver down Marcus's spine, though he couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was the way the name seemed to pulse on the page, as if it were alive. Unable to resist the allure of the mysterious recipes, Marcus decided to try one that very night. The recipe was for a dish called côtelette de rêve, a lamb dish unlike any he had ever seen. The ingredients were simple enough: lamb, rosemary, garlic, and a few other herbs. But the instructions were unusually specific, almost ritualistic in their precision. As he prepared the dish, Marcus found himself lost in the process, as if something unseen were guiding his hands. The kitchen felt different, colder, darker, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. But he was too engrossed to care. The moment the lamb touched the pan, the aroma that filled the kitchen was intoxicating. It was as if every culinary achievement he had ever dreamed of was being realized in that one dish. He plated the food, and before he knew it, he was sitting down to taste it. The first bite was pure ecstasy. The flavors were beyond anything he had ever imagined, rich, deep, and hauntingly perfect. But as he savored the dish, he felt a strange sensation in his mouth. He paused, reached up, and to his horror pulled out a small, sharp bone fragment. Panicking, Marcus inspected the dish. It was perfect, just as he had prepared it. There were no bones in the lamb. There shouldn't have been. But the bone in his hand was undeniable, and as he held it up to the light, he noticed something even more disturbing. The bone was human. Marcus recoiled in disgust, his mind racing. How could this be? He checked the book again, looking for answers, but the words on the page had changed. Now, instead of a recipe, there was a single line written in blood-red ink. The first taste of perfection comes with a price. Despite the horrifying incident, Marcus couldn't resist the pull of the cookbook. Each recipe he tried brought with it incredible results. Dishes that defied culinary logic and tasted like they had been crafted by the gods themselves. But with each dish, something dark and terrifying happened. When he prepared a dish called soupe d'âme, the broth began to swirl on its own, forming faces, agonized, screaming faces. The soup tasted divine, but it was accompanied by the sound of distant wailing echoing through the kitchen. For pain de mort, a simple bread recipe, Marcus noticed that the dough seemed to breathe as he kneaded it. When it was baked, the crust was perfect, but when he sliced into it, the loaf bled like a fresh wound, staining the cutting board crimson. With each dish, the horrors grew more intense. The kitchen became a place of nightmares. Pots and pans clattered on their own. Knives flew off the counters, and the shadows seemed to whisper in an ancient, forgotten tongue. Marcus's health began to deteriorate. He lost weight, his eyes became sunken, and his once steady hands now trembled constantly. But he couldn't stop. The cookbook had a hold on him, and every time he tried to resist, he felt an overwhelming compulsion to cook just one more dish. One night, as Marcus prepared a dish called pâté de sang, he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the kitchen, barely visible in the dim light. It was a woman, dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothing. Her eyes were hollow, her face gaunt, and her presence filled the room with an unbearable sense of dread. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, though his voice shook with fear. The woman stepped forward, and as she did, the temperature in the kitchen plummeted. "I am Lucia Montclair," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves, "and you have stolen my recipes." Marcus stumbled back, his mind racing. Lucia Montclair, the name from the book. "I didn't mean to steal anything. I just found the book." Lucia's hollow eyes locked onto his. "These recipes were cursed, bound by blood and death. I was wronged, betrayed by those I trusted, and in my final moments, I bound my soul to this book, cursing anyone who dared to use it. You have fed off my pain, my suffering, and now you must pay." Marcus tried to plead, but the words caught in his throat. The kitchen began to warp and twist around him, the walls closing in, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. The utensils in the kitchen came alive, flying at him with murderous intent. He ducked and dodged, but it was no use. Lucia reached out, her skeletal fingers brushing against his arm, and a searing pain shot through Marcus's body. He screamed as the skin on his arm began to blacken and peel away, revealing raw, bloody flesh beneath. The pain was unbearable, but worse was the realization that he was turning into one of the ingredients, the human flesh and bone that had haunted his dishes. With a final, desperate effort, Marcus grabbed the cookbook and threw it into the fire. The flames roared to life, consuming the book in an instant. Lucia screamed, a blood-curdling sound that echoed through the kitchen as she was pulled into the flames, her form twisting and writhing until she was nothing but ash. The kitchen went silent. The shadows retreated, the walls returned to normal, and the utensils fell harmlessly to the floor. Marcus collapsed, his body trembling with pain and fear. The book was gone, but the scars, both physical and mental, would remain forever. Marcus closed La Belle Cuisine the next day. He could no longer bear to be in the kitchen, the place that had once been his sanctuary. The memories of the Cursed Cookbook and the horrors it had unleashed were too much to bear. He tried to move on, but the nightmares persisted. Every night he dreamed of Lucia Montclair, her hollow eyes staring at him from the darkness, whispering of pain, betrayal, and revenge. The scars on his arm never fully healed, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for his obsession with perfection. The Cursed Cookbook was never seen again, its ashes scattered to the winds. But the legend of Marcus Reynolds and the horrors of La Belle Cuisine lived on, whispered among chefs and food critics, a cautionary tale of the dangers of pursuing perfection at any cost. And somewhere, in the deepest shadows of the culinary world, a new cookbook was being written, bound not in leather but in human skin, with recipes written in blood, waiting for the next chef who dared to seek perfection, at any price. If this tale of culinary terror gripped your imagination, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories that will leave you craving for more, or maybe just leave you with a taste of fear.